Welcome back, everyone. This is your 5 p.m. update on now Hurricane Ian. So to recap you, Ian weakened to a tropical storm as it moved across the Florida Peninsula, but now that it's re-emerged back over the waters of the Atlantic, it's re-strengthened and acquired the hurricane designation with maximum sustained winds of 75 miles per hour. But I don't want to focus on the center of circulation, and we sort of talked about this all week, because look at the rain shield that is already developed well in advance of the center of circulation, already starting to move onshore coastal South Carolina and Georgia. In the wind field, this orange area here, this is the size of the wind field, the tropical storm force winds. Look how large it is relative to the center of circulation. This storm has just been big since it got into the Gulf of Mexico, and that's going to continue. Now let's walk you through the watches and warnings. So the blue area here is the tropical storm warning. Tropical storm warning is a blue area. The pink is probably a little hard to see here. Steve, you might have to zoom in a little bit, is the hurricane watch. But most importantly, the red from the Savannah River to Cape Fear. So all of coastal South Carolina and a little bit of North Carolina to Cape Fear is now under a hurricane warning. And that's very important, hurricane warning for this area. It's going to be natural for people to want to lower their guard with Ian because it's not as powerful as it was in the Gulf of Mexico. And I'm really telling you, please don't do that. Ian is going to move off and start to turn more towards the north, and then somewhat back to the north-northwest, then move inland over South Carolina and western portions of North Carolina, where it'll weaken down to a tropical depression on Saturday. Now let's look at this, because I want to help you with the inland warnings as well. The previous graphic was the coastal warnings. Now I want to help you with the inland warnings. The red area here, again, hurricane warning. We already talked about that. But look how far inland the tropical storm, the blue, tropical storm warning goes inland over South Carolina and North Carolina. Also eclipse portions of Georgia as well. But Columbia, you're in this. Raleigh, you're in this. So if you're watching from inland and thinking that this is just a coastal phenomenon, I'm hoping to change your mind tonight. If we look at the storm surge, there's a reason this part of the coastline is called the low country, because it's low and flat. What makes this part of the country really, really beautiful, the estuaries, the rivers, that basically allows sort of a highway for the storm surge to push inland. And you can see here with the colors where we have the storm surge, basically a heightened storm surge risk from about Flagler of Volusia County line in Florida all the way up to Duck, North Carolina, including Pamlico and the Neuse River, Pamlico Sound and the Neuse River. But the highest threat is here in coastal South Carolina. Well, up to 4 to 7 feet of storm surge is possible. This is, this is the potential. So this is what we need you to prepare for. And the highest threat would be Edisto Beach to Murrells Inlet. And in looking at the latest trend in the guidance, I'm really worried about this area on the sort of northern flank of that strip could potentially get the highest of that range if the forecast holds. The brighter pink here is the storm surge warning. Warnings mean conditions are expected, or is a brighter pink. Then this watch area, this lighter pink, is the watch area in North Carolina. But notice here, and I'll explain this for you because it probably looks a little unnatural, the Neuse River, the lower reaches of the Neuse River under a storm surge warning. And the reason for that, I'll explain it, is as the winds sort of come like this from a northeasterly direction, it basically shoves the sound south, and then it backs up the river and basically causes a confluence, if you will, or funneling right here in the Neuse River. So if you're here in the Neuse River, you know you're flood prone. You typically get a lot of flooding in this area with just about every hurricane. Now let's switch to the flash flooding or flood risk potential. This is our excessive rainfall risk, meaning with the risk of heavy rain that might produce flash flooding. You can see here, and this is the inland part. I want to stress this red area, which is a moderate risk, the Charleston, Charlotte, Raleigh-Durham, potentially all the way to Roanoke, Virginia, a risk of heavy rain spreading inland as Ian pulls back up into southeast United States. Now I want to end with this, especially as Floridians are starting to recover from the devastating impacts of Ian's march across the Florida Peninsula. We typically get a lot of fatalities, unfortunately, in the days after a disaster. They call it indirect deaths, and this is typically comes during the recovery phase. And I want to explain this. Now, I recognize that a lot of people in the path of Ian probably don't have power and internet, so I'm asking for you, if you're outside of that area, to call your family and help them with this. We get a lot of fatalities from heat, so let's think about this. No power, no air conditioning. It's very humid down here in Florida this time of year. People are out trying to clean up their yard. They overexert themselves. A lot of heat-related deaths in the days after a hurricane. But this is the big one. This is a big one. Carbon monoxide poisoning from people running their generators. So people trying to get power restored, trying to pick their lives back up, will typically run generators. Some people just don't know how, the safety of those generators. Also, there's typically a huge fear that someone will steal them, and so people will bring them into their garage, run them in their garage, or they'll run them under an open window, and then the carbon monoxide comes back into the house. This is a colorless, odorless gas, so you're not going to get a warning. You're not going to smell it and get a warning. So please be very careful if you've never run a generator before. Ask your neighbor, ask somebody else to help you run that generator safely. Never try to refuel it while it's running. That's a big, big one. Don't try to refuel it while it's running. So please be safe. Please call your family in Florida and ask them to be safe with respect to heat, overexerting themselves in the heat, and carbon monoxide poisoning. That is it from the National Hurricane Center. We'll be providing you updates as needed or at our typical time tomorrow at 11:30.